This is the true account of Erwin Bartmann, a soldier of one of the most infamous divisions of World War II, the Leibstandarte SS. In this video, I'll take you deep into his harrowing journey into the Soviet Union, through his first brutal battles, encounters with the enemy, and the lesser-known moments that reveal the grit and horror of the Eastern Front. This is his story. I remember that morning in Lichterfelde like it was yesterday. Every man was on edge, polishing his boots until they shone, brushing every bit of dust from his uniform. We looked immaculate, like the very image of the Leibstandarte we dreamed of being. It was meant to be our first official leave, a chance to breathe, to see family, to celebrate our progress. We had breakfast in the dormitory, all buzzing with anticipation. The laughing devil, as we called him, stopped by for a surprise inspection. He looked us over and with a rare nod of approval disappeared back down the stairwell. The room was full of chatter, full of energy. It sounded like a schoolyard moments before the final bell. We were almost free. Then, half an hour later, his head popped around the corner again, this time with news. He told us that Kompaniführer Becker wanted to address us outside, so we straightened our caps and uniforms and rushed down to the assembly area. The sky above was clear and blue, the kind that felt like it could lift your spirit. The laughing devil and Becker were already there, standing tall as we filed into perfectly straight rows. "Attention! Right dress, eyes front." Becker's face was solemn. Something was wrong. Then he told us. "I have some unwelcome news," he said. "The barracks are now sealed. All leave is cancelled until further notice." A heavy silence fell. He pulled out a transcript of a message the Führer had given earlier that morning. His voice was calm but firm as he read the final line aloud. "The fate of Europe and the future of the Reich are in your hands, and may God help us in this struggle." None of us spoke. We just stood there stunned, trying to process it all. Germany was now at war with Russia. The laughing devil stepped forward again, eyes sharp and burning with pride. "Soldiers of the Leibstandarte," he said, "you know what to do when you return to your dormitories. Be ready to move at a moment's notice. Company dismissed." Just like that, the mood shifted. Shock gave way to purpose. This was what we had trained for. The endless drills, the marching, the guard duty, it all led to this. Operation Barbarossa was beginning. We were going east to face the Bolsheviks. The leadership believed that the Soviets would stab us in the back, using the cover of our planned invasion of England as their moment to strike. So we were moving first. From the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea, our forces were rolling. Back in the dorm, we packed our gear and waited. Trucks rumbled outside, drawing us to the windows, but no orders came. The excitement slowly faded into a kind of anxious stillness. Evening came and went with no new developments. We lay on our bunks in full uniform, boots off, but ready to go at a moment's notice. Morning brought the usual roll call and routine. I was on sentry duty later when I bumped into Max. He looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "Did you hear about Becker?" I shook my head. "He's been shot," Max said. "Taken to the SS hospital on Unter den Eichen." I couldn't believe it. Word was that he'd been sneaking around the Reich Chancellery, testing the guards. One of them challenged him. He didn't respond fast enough and the sentry fired. The bullet went through Becker's upper leg, just inches from being fatal. The guard who shot him was praised for his discipline and immediately promoted. It could have gone much worse for both of them. August came quickly. At the start of the month, we received our orders. We'd be posted to a frontline field unit. But just days before departure, my right index finger became infected from a minor injury. It had to be lanced to release the pus, and it hadn't fully healed. I went to the company doctor. He looked at the notes and said, "Your finger hasn't healed yet." I shot back with the phrase we were trained to say. "Pain is in the brain, Obersturmführer. It doesn't stop me from fighting." He gave a small smile, clearly not impressed. "Even so, I have to offer you the option of staying in Berlin until you're fully recovered," he said. I told him I wanted to stay with my comrades. There must have been something in my voice because he nodded and scribbled something on my file. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll leave with them tomorrow. Same train." The next morning, after roll call, each of us was issued supplies: a salami sausage, tinned meat, butter, bread. We stuffed them into our rucksacks and marched to the train station at Lichterfelde. It was packed, soldiers and civilians everywhere. A military band played loud, proud music that made us feel like nothing could touch us. Obergruppenführer von Jena gave a speech full of fire and pride, saying we would crush Bolshevism and save European culture. When he finished, we clambered aboard the train, squeezing into the carriages. Everyone fought for a spot near the windows. The scene on the platform felt like a strange celebration. Young girls from the League of German Girls waved tiny red flags. Members of the Hitler Youth cheered. The whistle blew, and the band played Preußens Gloria as the train groaned into motion. I caught sight of my mother just before we pulled away. Her face was pale, but she managed a smile and waved her handkerchief one last time. As the train sped off, the sun bled red over the skyline. Later, a sign came into view: Krakow. We hadn't even fully stopped before the doors were flung open and we were ordered out onto the platform. An officer told us there were no trucks, so we'd have to march to our destination. I didn't mind. After that long train ride, the fresh air felt good. We sang our marching songs as our boots struck the cobbled road in perfect unison. It felt like a dream come true. The Leibstandarte, marching together as one. A double tram line led us over the river Vistula, and soon we were walking through a heavy gate marked with a Hebrew inscription and the Star of David. We had entered the Jewish ghetto. The mood shifted instantly. From apartment windows, hollow-eyed faces stared at us. Doors slammed. Voices cursed us. Buckets of urine were hurled down from above. "Do not react," an officer barked. "They have their own laws here." We pushed on, silent, through the filth and hatred. After leaving the ghetto, we climbed a hill and reached a barracks where Totenkopf units were stationed. Those of us who got soaked cleaned up as best we could. I was lucky. I escaped the worst of it. But that night, lying on my bunk, I couldn't stop thinking about the ghetto. For the first time, war didn't feel so glorious. Days passed in the usual rhythm: drills, training, more orders. Then we were back at the station. Only this time, it was cattle trucks. The romantic image of our grand departure from Lichterfelde already felt far away. The train ride was slow and winding, clearly planned to avoid prying eyes. After several days in the heat, we finally reached a small halt in the middle of nowhere. Outside, a sea of golden sunflowers stretched to the horizon. We climbed into trucks and were taken to a barn where we'd spend the night. That evening we lit a fire with wood we gathered nearby. As we sat around it singing old songs, an old farmer approached. He kept his distance, listening. Our Unterscharführer waved him over. The man came closer, and when one of us greeted him in broken Russian, he replied in perfect German. He was a Volksdeutscher from Ukraine, a man whose family had settled there generations ago. We invited him to join us. More villagers appeared, including a young woman in her 20s. "I had 3 brothers," she told us, "all taken by the communists, just for complaining about the collective farms." She didn't know where they were, only that her letters went unanswered, and that almost every man under 60 had now been arrested as a spy. The old man spoke up next. "We're lucky to be alive," he said, gesturing to the others. "It's not 10 years since they starved us nearly to death. There was cannibalism, children kidnapped, some eaten by their own parents, driven mad by hunger." I could hardly believe it. Here in this rich, fertile land. "Did you really see that?" I asked. He looked away. "No, not with my own eyes. That's not the sort of thing you do in front of neighbours." He stared into the fire and added quietly, "I lost 4 grandchildren to the famine. We call it the Holodomor. The communists put up posters calling it barbaric to eat children." His voice trembled with grief and rage. "What caused it?" I asked. "It wasn't a famine," he said with cold certainty. "It was punishment. They took our tools, our grain, shot those who resisted. We were left to die." His hatred for Stalin was raw, and in that moment, I felt something shift in me. Maybe we weren't just soldiers. Maybe we really were liberators, as they said. For a moment, I believed it. Then our Unterscharführer stood and broke into song. "Auf der Heide blüht ein kleines Blümelein," he sang. Others joined in, German and Ukrainian voices mixing in the firelight. It lifted the mood, made us feel connected, human. But then, an Untersturmführer arrived. Stern-faced, he told us to end the gathering. Lights out. Now. Our Usha tried to reason with him, saying it was harmless to spend time with locals, but the officer cut him off cold. Disobey again, and you'll all face court-martial. He vanished into the dark, leaving us in silence. Our Usha, a big-hearted farm boy, muttered just loud enough for all to hear, "He's a real regulation junkie, hasn't a clue how to lead men." And we all knew he was right. That officer was the exception. Most of our leaders were good men, but even in that moment of quiet rebellion, the mood had changed again, and I could feel the weight of what was ahead pressing back down on us. They let the gathering go on well past midnight. Somehow, despite the strict orders earlier, the officers turned a blind eye, and we sat around the fire long into the night, warmed by the flames, the music, and the brief sense of peace in a war that offered little of it. But by the next morning, it was time to move again. Refreshed after some real rest, we climbed aboard the trucks and continued the journey toward the front. The sun beamed down from a flawless blue sky, casting light over the rolling countryside. I couldn't help but stare out like a tourist, eyes wide, soaking in the beauty of it all. Golden fields, open skies, and the sense of something big approaching just over the horizon. As we drove past a field of towering sunflowers, I couldn't help but say it aloud. "They're beautiful," I said, mostly to myself, but the Usha heard me. "Beautiful, yes," he replied, squinting out at the stalks, "but a death trap for infantry." That shut me up. I realized once again how naive I still was. Even beauty in war came with danger. A few days later, the sky turned. The rain came down hard and fast, soaking everything. The dirt roads, already rough, turned to deep, sucking mud. Time after time, we were forced to jump down from our trucks and push. Our boots slipped and our uniforms were caked in filth, backs straining as we tried to rock the vehicles free. Once, when a particularly deep rut swallowed our truck, we thought we'd never get it out, until a group of Russian prisoners was brought forward. Thin, silent men with blank faces took hold of ropes like a team in a tug-of-war match, and, with one great heave, they pulled our truck free. It was the first time I'd seen a captured Soviet soldier. The very next day, the sun returned and baked the mud into cracked stone beneath our feet. I was just one of 674 replacements for the Leibstandarte, called in after the heavy casualties we had taken during the battles at Uman and the fall of Kiev. We stood assembled in a quiet field not far from a grand country estate, its white fence stretching neatly across the grass. That house had become our regimental headquarters. Out front, the legendary Sepp Dietrich walked among us, our commander, our idol. He moved easily between the ranks, shaking hands, exchanging short words with the fresh recruits. He had a calm authority about him, like someone who had seen it all and still carried the weight of it with pride. Gradually, the crowd of newcomers was divided up. Groups were called forward and taken to their respective units, until only a dozen of us remained, standing in a neat line before Sepp Dietrich, a tall Untersturmführer and a Rottenführer. The officer stepped forward and began to explain our options. "4th Company," he said, "is a heavy assault company. It has 12 mortars and 12 heavy machine guns divided between 3 platoons. His voice was clipped, professional. Each machine gun crew has 5 men. Schütze 1 fires the weapon. Schütze 2 handles the tripod, guiding the gun's fire into the right area. The rest carry ammunition, 2 boxes each, 600 rounds total, and a spare barrel." He paced as he spoke, then stopped in front of us and pointed. "U8, with the Rottenführer." They filed off without a word, and I was left with 3 others. The Untersturmführer turned back to us. "The rest of you," he said, "will join the Kompanie-Truppe. You'll be in charge of communications, laying cable lines, carrying messages, keeping our front connected to our guns. Our mortar and machine gun fire is used to support the infantry as they push the enemy into our killing zones. The key to this strategy is precision, and precision depends on communication." As he spoke, a shadow flicked across his face. He looked up. Reflexively, we all turned skyward. I stared, confused, as a tiny black dot appeared in the sky, growing fast. A split second later, a thunderous boom knocked me off my feet. I flew backward over the picket fence and landed hard in a shallow ditch. The air filled with dust and screams. Beside me, of all people, was Sepp Dietrich himself. He lay flat, eyes squinting against the dust, bullets smacking into the ground all around us. A Soviet fighter plane screamed overhead, just meters above our heads. "Next time you see one of those," Sepp said with a grin, brushing dirt from his uniform, "dive for cover. I won't always be there to look after you." We took Cherson under fire, pressing on even as an Oberscharführer barked orders with a shard of shrapnel still buried in his arm, the blood seeping through his sleeve as if it were nothing. We passed graves where Soviet soldiers had fallen and joked with our comrades from the mountain troops who had, of all things, a train of camels with them. For a few brief days, the war slowed, and we soaked up the sun beside the Black Sea, eating sunflower seeds and staring out at the dark blue waves, their white crests dancing in the wind. It felt like peace, or at least a borrowed moment of it. But the rest didn't last. We were soon ordered northeast, toward Berislav and the river Dnieper. At first light on the 10th of September, we reached the edge of a plateau overlooking the wide Dnieper valley. I watched the silhouettes of men ahead of us begin to descend toward a pontoon bridge that stretched out endlessly into the morning mist. Then it was our turn. The rustle of gear, the clink of metal, the nervous jokes and laughter. These were the sounds of boys pretending not to be afraid. I tried not to show it, but my heart was pounding. Suddenly, a high-pitched whistling tore through the air. Someone screamed, "Take cover!" I hit the dirt just as the world around me exploded. The shock waves rocked my bones, and earth rained down like pieces of shrapnel from the sky. Russian artillery had found us. A spotter on the far bank was calling in every shot with terrifying precision. My hands trembled, my legs felt frozen. I didn't know what to do. None of us did. We were fresh, green, unprepared. Then came a voice through the chaos. "Follow me!" It was Usha Heinz Novotnik. He was only 21, but to us he was a seasoned veteran, someone who'd survived the meat grinder at Uman and lived to talk about it. If anyone knew how to stay alive, it was him. We followed his lead, sprinting forward and dropping just at the edge of the plateau. Overhead the shells screamed, but Novotnik kept shouting through the noise. "See? Hardly any strikes here. They're hitting the slope and the flat behind us." He was right. It was safer, if such a word even applied. Somehow, I found the courage to breathe again. I forced my nerves back into place, even as the screams of the wounded echoed all around. Then Novotnik rolled onto his back, eyes on the sky. "Stukas," he said. At first I heard nothing, but then that unmistakable whine filled the air. The terrifying music of the trumpets of Jericho. They flew in wing to wing, stooping down with terrifying speed. The earth across the river erupted in plumes of smoke and fire. The Russian shelling stopped immediately. Cheers rose from our men. My fear melted into something strange, something almost euphoric, the wild high of knowing I had survived, at least for now. As we continued forward and reached the riverbank, we passed a small, raised rectangle of land where old wooden crosses stood in quiet rows. "Romanian engineers," Novotnik explained. "They built the bridge." Nearby, a half-track with a 20mm flak gun was hidden beneath branches, its crew silently scanning the sky. Just then, a flock of birds burst from the reeds, flapping low across the wild, foaming river. I watched them go, feeling a cold twist in my gut. I couldn't swim. If I fell off that narrow, railingless bridge, I'd be gone, dragged under by the current straight to the Black Sea. Out here, survival wasn't about strength or skill alone. It took luck, or maybe a guardian angel. Mine didn't take long to show up again. A Russian unit was dug in along a shallow ravine, blocking our advance. Second Company had taken up position on the far side of a field, roughly 2 kilometers from our command post, and were holding against the enemy. I was tasked with running telephone cables to them. It was my job, and I set to it without hesitation. The field was dry, covered in yellowed stubble. A few stray bullets sang through the air as I crouched low and ran the line out across the open ground. I was moving well, keeping low, staying focused. Just 20 meters ahead, some infantry reinforcements were moving in the same direction. Then, boom! A sudden, sharp explosion cracked through the air and threw dust high into the sky. I hit the ground hard and watched the fine particles float like ghosts. Someone screamed for a medic. "Sani, Sani!" One of the men had stepped on a mine. My blood froze. I scanned the ground and spotted it. A patch of grass, too yellow, too unnatural. And there it was, partially hidden, another mine, barely covered. I'd already crossed this field twice without triggering anything, but now I knew it was a minefield. I had no choice. Without the communication line, our machine guns and mortars would be blind and the infantry would be exposed. Swallowing my fear, I stood and kept running the cable, every step a silent prayer that I wouldn't vanish in a flash of flame and steel. As I passed the wounded man, one of his comrades was trying to stop the bleeding. His legs were mangled. Another soldier knelt beside him, gripping his hand, saying nothing. I pushed the scene from my mind and pressed on. Reaching the foxholes, I saw an officer waving me over. I dropped the Bakelite phone box next to him and shoved the grounding spike into the dry earth. He picked up the receiver, tried to call back. Nothing. "It's not earthed properly," he snapped. "I can't get through." My hands fumbled with the wire, then he barked, "Piss on it, man. What do they teach recruits these days?" I did exactly what he said. It worked. And just like that, I learned a new trick about field communication. Not wanting to press my luck again in that cursed minefield, I chose to circle wide on the way back, a 5-kilometer detour. My legs were aching, my throat dry, but I didn't care. I was alive, and I wasn't going to tempt fate more than I already had. We formed up along the northern shores of the Sea of Azov and pushed forward to take Melitopol. The fighting was bitter, especially once we hit Soviet resistance, but we forced them back. Later, we had to plug a dangerous breakthrough in a sector held by our Romanian allies. Once stabilized, we kept moving east and captured Berdyansk. It wasn't heavily defended, but that didn't make it less dangerous. It was there I faced the nerve-wracking task of trench clearing for the first time. I was assigned to an infantry platoon. When we reached the enemy trenches, we split into 2 groups and stormed in opposite directions. The Russians couldn't tell whether friend or foe would come around the next bend, and that hesitation gave us the upper hand. Fear and confusion worked in our favor. After the trenches were cleared, we reveled in our success. Our hair had lightened under the relentless Ukrainian sun, and we sang until our throats were raw as we moved on toward Taganrog. Then, a long column of civilians blocked our path. They weren't fleeing from us, they were fleeing the Red Army. Women and children mostly, carrying their belongings slung over their shoulders in a kind of knotted sack that wrapped around their bodies, freeing up their hands for other burdens. The trucks ahead of us stopped, and 3 officers leapt out, sidearms drawn, shouting at the civilians to clear the road. Slowly, they shuffled to the ditches, forming a tired, uneven line. As our truck rolled past them, a girl, no older than 18, lowered her sack and flicked her long dark hair behind one ear. "Gut Reise," she called, waving. That may have been all the German she knew. "Danke, danke," said one of our guys with a wide smile, leaning out to look back at her as long as possible. "My God, she's beautiful," he said, not taking his eyes off her. But then, screams. I'll never forget the sound. All at once, we stood in the truck, looking back. "What the hell's going on?" someone shouted. Toward the rear of our convoy, we saw the girl struggling beneath one of our own men. Her screams were sharp and cutting, even over the sound of engines. The officers came running, pistols drawn. The man, a veteran from the campaign in Greece, we later learned, didn't even notice them. They dragged him off her, threw him to the ground. A shot rang out, just one, and it was over. The man lay still. No explanation was given. None was needed. He was no longer one of us. The message was clear. We soon reached Taganrog, a major town by the Sea of Azov with steelworks and aircraft factories. Our attacking force was thin, about 300 men and a handful of assault guns. We crossed the river Mius and followed a road that ran parallel to the railway line. Where the terrain dipped, the railway embankments blocked our view of the land ahead. So far, no contact. We moved fast, our company truck riding in one of the old trucks the Leibstandarte had received back in 1932, donated by President Hindenburg. Then we stopped. I stood up to see what was happening. Hauptsturmführer Krocher had climbed the embankment, scanning with his binoculars. Moments later, he ordered the mortars deployed along the roadside and machine guns placed up on the embankment. Ammo was passed around quickly. A haze of red dust appeared in the distance. Russian cavalry, maybe 300 or 400 strong, were approaching with wagons. One of our gunners grinned and said, "If they don't spot us, this'll be a duck shoot." We went silent, only the wind. Then from the far side, a soft Russian folk melody floated through the air. It was surreal, peaceful. They had no idea we were here. "Fire!" Our mortars roared, horses screamed, men fell like rag dolls, wagons shattered, panic set in. Some civilians were among them. They ran, scattering across the field. Our machine guns opened up with deadly precision. A commissar tried to rally the survivors into a cavalry charge, but we tore them apart as they came. It was hopeless, brutal, and final. When it was over, the moaning of the wounded drifted over the quiet. A few Russians rose to their knees, arms raised. But the order had already come down. Move on to Taganrog. The Wehrmacht would deal with the wounded. 2 Russian tanks blocked our path ahead. We weren't going to let that stop us. Our machine gunners focused their fire. Inside a tank, that kind of noise could break a man, maybe even jam a turret ring. Then an anti-tank gun from another unit took a shot. The first tank erupted. Its turret blasted into the air and landing with a hollow clang. The second was hit before it could react. Smoke poured from it. A man tried to climb out, but before he could make it, he was struck and fell back into the burning steel. In the heart of Taganrog, I ran for the cover of a shop doorway, holding my Gewehr 98 out for balance. I sidestepped rubble, careful not to twist an ankle. A bright purple flash went off beside me. I was thrown down hard. My arm burned, and for a moment I thought it was gone. But when I stood up, dazed and coughing through dust, I saw only scratches on my hands. My rifle lay nearby, the butt blown clean off by shrapnel. It should have been my leg. Another narrow escape, another favour from my unseen guardian. As I caught my breath, I looked toward the harbour. A Russian ship was under fire from our flak cannon. It took hit after hit until it finally sank, sealing off the harbour entrance with black smoke rising high above. I found a new rifle, but my job wasn't over. Usha called my name along with 5 others. A Rottenführer was put in charge, a cold, distant man who had been with 4th Company since the beginning. "There," Usha said, pointing up a steep hill toward a cluster of buildings near the lighthouse. "Secure the radio station." We checked our ammo, then started climbing. The October wind cooled our faces, but we were sweating hard by the time we reached the top. We dropped to the ground, gasping, then crawled up to the edge. Popping noises came from inside the station, glass breaking. We listened. Then our Rottenführer turned to the biggest man among us, a towering soldier nearly 2 meters tall. "Kick the door in. The rest, cover the windows. When it breaks, rush in." He didn't hesitate. One heavy kick, then another. The glass breaking stopped. Voices screamed in Russian. One more kick. The door flew open. I was the first through. I caught a glimpse of the Soviets disappearing through another door at the far end. I charged instinctively. "Stop!" the Rottenführer barked. "You don't know what's behind that door." He was right. I had a lot to learn. The others scanned the windows, looking for signs of the enemy. "Nothing," someone whispered. The Rottenführer pointed to the rear. "Open it." I yanked the door wide and followed him through. He peered down the slope and lowered his weapon. "Clear. Let's search the place. I need to report." Inside, shattered glass sparkled across the floor. Tiny beads of quicksilver, mercury, shimmered under the light. They'd smashed the equipment before fleeing. Soon, a runner arrived with news. Taganrog was ours. Our Rottenführer made his report. New orders came immediately. Collect all the mercury, leave the windows open. We didn't want anyone poisoned. We found a shovel and swept the silvery liquid into a puddle near the back. The next day, we combed the city for hiding Russian soldiers. In a cemetery, I found the body of the Untersturmführer, who had once threatened us with court-martial, casting golden light across the ruined streets. When I arrived, I joined a line of Kameraden, mostly fellow newcomers. Standing ahead of me was Max, the same Max who had accidentally shot himself back in Lichterfelde. "Do you know what this is about?" I asked. He nodded toward a well nearby. "They found a recon unit in there, from 3rd Company, all dead, no ID tags. We're here to try and identify them." Inside, the bodies were laid out under white and pacing near the well, cursing loud enough for all of us to hear. "Handschuhe," he spat, "the bastards. That one's a little Russian party trick they like to play when they catch an SS man." He held up his hands, miming as though peeling off gloves. "They start by dunking your hands into boiling water. Stalin's socken. Stalin's socks." A freezing tremor ran through my entire body. Every nerve seemed to tense and pull tight. I'd already seen what battle could do. Bodies ripped apart by shrapnel, faces burned, legs gone, blood soaking the mud. But this was something else, something far more disturbing. I could understand wounds in war, chaos, chance, fury, but this was cruelty, intentional, cold. To torture another human being, piece by piece, for amusement, I couldn't process it. My mind recoiled from the image, yet it stayed burned behind my eyes. The veteran glanced at me, half smirking, half serious. "You haven't been told yet, have you?" he asked. "Never let them take you, not the Russians, never." Then quieter, almost like a vow, "Don't worry. Those bastards will get what's coming to them." As I walked away, my stomach was twisted into knots. The hatred inside me, which had already been smouldering from everything I'd seen and heard, now flared up into something far more raw. I understood now. That trip to the GPU offices hadn't been just about identifying the dead. It was a warning, a message, and it had found its mark. The rain tapped against what few intact window panes remained. In the bare room, the only furniture was a tattered red chaise longue, slumped against the far wall beneath the lone window. We took turns sitting on it, enjoying our meagre dinner. Damp bread and a sliver of cold sausage, maybe 100 grams if that, before settling down for the night in uniforms that stank of mildew and mud. Toward the end of October 1941, we were pulled back to defensive positions to stabilize the lines. Our reconnaissance units had detected signs of a determined Soviet counterattack. 4th Company positioned its machine guns along the slope of a hill, carefully adjusting the mounts to mark out a killing zone. But we were spread too thin, and the wide gaps in our defenses left us exposed. For the next 3 weeks, my world was a shallow trench, barely half a meter wide and 1.5 meters long. The rain came often and heavy, turning the earth to a cold mess. To make it more livable, I walked into the nearby town and scavenged an old wooden door to use as a roof. I packed soil on top to add protection and left a small gap for entry. Beside the opening, I kept my field telephone and 4 stick grenades. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I spent most of the time alone, huddled in that damp hole, just trying to keep warm. One afternoon, the ground began to shake under a sudden Russian artillery barrage. The silence I'd known was shattered in an instant. I crouched in the corner of my makeshift shelter, staring wide-eyed into the dark, knowing full well that a shell landing nearby could tear me to pieces in the blink of an eye. Worse than death, I feared being wounded, not killed outright, but maimed, too slow to flee if the Russians broke through. After everything I'd heard about what they did to captured SS men, the thought chilled me more than the cold ever could. The shelling finally tapered off, but the quiet didn't last. Russian voices erupted into a battle cry as they surged forward. Bullets sliced the air above me. Mortar blasts boomed in the soaked earth around us. I gripped my rifle tighter and edged toward the short stretch of open trench near my bunker's mouth. Then, a deafening explosion, a thunderclap of raw energy. My vision vanished. Silence. Nothing but black. For a second, I truly thought I was dead. Maybe this was the afterlife, alone in a place without light or sound, trapped in eternity. I clawed at the soil around me until, at last, a sliver of light broke through. I widened the gap, pushed my head out, and the world came back. The high-pitched buzz of bullets overhead, the shouting of comrades, and the steady beat of combat. "Erwin, are you wounded?" someone shouted. I turned and saw the nearby MG crew waving at me. "No!" I called back, still half in shock. They laughed in relief. I crawled out of my shelter and looked down. My grenades were gone. A crater marked the spot. A bullet or shard of shrapnel must have hit them directly. If I had stepped outside just a second earlier, I'd have been torn apart. My field phone had vanished. I was still alive, thanks to fate, or perhaps my guardian angel once again. "We thought you were a goner, Erwin," someone called. I raised a hand and waved. I was still here. Then the real battle began. The Russians charged straight into the arcs of our machine guns, piling their dead atop the wounded in a senseless wave. Their tactics were brutal and costly. Still they came, slipping in the mud, stepping over fallen comrades, pushing forward like automatons. But eventually, their assault faltered. The field fell quiet. Our orders came. Fix bayonets. Bayonet orders usually meant we were preparing for brutal close-quarters combat, but the Russians gave up. They threw down their weapons, raised their hands and shouted, "The war is over!" I stepped out of my trench to see them better. They looked terrified, likely thinking the worst. Soviet propaganda must have told them that surrendering to the Waffen-SS meant instant execution, Most kept their eyes downcast, avoiding our gaze, but one man, tall, broad-shouldered, with hollow cheeks and tired eyes, looked right at me. I gave a small wave, unsure if it would even register. He responded by reaching into his pocket, then shook his head and showed his empty hands. I pointed at his cap. Without hesitation, he removed it, tore off the red star, and handed it to me with a sad, toothless smile. Then he turned and joined the other prisoners. Before he disappeared from sight, he looked back. I waved again. He waved in return. I still have that badge. It rests in the same box as my Iron Cross and Wound badge. Looking back, it was foolish to accept it. If I'd been captured with that insignia in my pocket, my captors might have thought I was a spy or worse, but I kept it. And when I take it out, I remember that moment, and I wonder if that man ever made it home. The rain finally stopped. I was on watch duty, relieving Boris, a Romanian with German roots. He knew Russian fluently, so he'd become our unofficial translator. He slumped into a pile of blankets and began to snore. Outside, the moonlight poured through broken clouds, casting silver streaks across the wet streets. I leaned my rifle against the wall and tried to ignore my grumbling stomach. About an hour passed before I heard it. Voices, faint and unclear. I froze, straining to listen. Were they real, or just a trick of fatigue and hunger? The voices grew louder. Russian. "Erwin," Boris whispered. "Did you hear that?" "Russians," I whispered back. "A dozen of them. Right outside." I gripped my rifle and sank deeper into the shadows as the group stopped by the window. Armed with submachine guns, they would cut us to pieces if they stormed the house. The other two were still asleep. If I made a sound, it could be over for all of us. The Russians were arguing, one gesturing back down the road they'd come from. They were lost. Then silence. A voice called out from further away. Laughter. One of them slapped the man who'd led the group astray, and they all wandered off. I didn't exhale until they were out of sight. My whole body ached with tension. Then I heard the back window creak open. "Regenbogen," came a voice. It was Boris. The password confirmed it. He stepped into the room, grinning. "Did you hear their officer call them back?" I nodded. "Yeah, lucky for us." He laughed. "That wasn't Russian. That was me. Now you owe me an hour's watch." Our two sleeping comrades stirred, none the wiser to how close death had crept that night. Later, we were slogging through thick black mud. The rain pelted down in freezing sheets. Every step sucked at our boots. We reached the edge of a dreary village, barely visible in the gloom. We were waiting on the return of a recon team. Our lieutenant scanned the horizon with binoculars. "Verdammt, I can't see anything in this rain. Hold your fire," he said. We wouldn't have fired without his order anyway. Then, movement. Shadows in the bushes. One man waved both arms 3 times, paused, then waved again. That was the signal. The recon team reached us and cursed the rain. "We'll have to fight for our beds tonight," one muttered. Our company troop had been attached to an infantry unit to bolster their strength for the assault. We fixed bayonets. The village would be taken house by house. As we advanced, Russian machine gun fire cut down several of our men. I ducked into a doorway as bullets shattered the stone around me. A ricochet zipped past my face like a hummingbird. We returned fire with our MG-34s. A stick grenade found its mark and the enemy machine gun was silenced. Street by street we fought through cold wind and lashing rain. The village fell to us, briefly. A fierce Soviet counterattack pushed us back. Then we surged forward once more. Houses changed hands several times before we finally secured the area by nightfall. Casualties were light, considering the brutality of the fighting. We held the front room of a corner house, just 4 of us, and were the only Germans for 100 meters in any direction. It wasn't ideal, but it was dry, and after the day we'd had, the 8 shell hit it. The train screeched to a halt, and another shell smashed a goods wagon to splinters. From up on the hill, the flak crew were tearing the train apart for